Welcome back, everyone. Thrilled to have you here for another explainer. Today, we're focusing on something you probably have sitting right on your kitchen counter. It's an everyday staple, so common we barely give it a second thought. But, as we're going to see today, this humble item is actually the secret engine that built human civilization. Yep, we're talking about bread. I want to start by posing a question to you right off the bat. What if bread never existed? Seriously, take a second to imagine a world where humans never figured out how to bake. It might sound kind of trivial, but without bread, there would likely be no major cities, no written language, no massive ancient empires, and definitely no modern economy. Almost everything we associate with advanced human society traces its roots straight back to this simple food. All right, Section 1, Birth of the First Loaf. Let's look at the origins of bread. To really grasp this paradigm shift, we gotta rewind way back to an era long before modern agriculture even existed, right after the last ice age in the Fertile Crescent. For tens of thousands of years, humans lived as nomadic hunter-gatherers, just wandering around, foraging for wild wheat and barley. But then, this massive transformation happens. Humanity shifts from wandering foragers to settled farmers. Why? Well, because we discovered that a simple mixture of crushed grain and water, heated over a fire, could provide a reliable, storable, and super energy-dense food. We literally stopped wandering because we needed to stay in one place to cultivate, store, and bake our brain. Look at how this builds over thousands of years. We see wild grain gathering happening around 23,000 BC, but the real breakthrough, that comes at 14,000 BC. There's this incredible archaeological discovery from the Natufian culture in modern-day Jordan. They were actually grinding wild grains on stone hearths to make the very first flatbreads, way before farming was officially invented. That single culinary innovation acted like a catalyst. By 10,000 BC, full-scale agriculture begins just to support the demand for grain. And by 8,000 BC, we start seeing early permanent villages. Bread essentially anchored humanity to the land. Moving right along to Section 2, Grains that Built Empires, Fueling Ancient Worlds. As those early villages grew, bread transitioned from mere sustenance to the ultimate tool of political power. Check this out. In early civilizations, grain supplied over 50% of all daily calories. Think about what that means for a second. Grain was essentially the original currency. It was the biological fuel that powered massive populations, built entire workforces, and sustained huge armies. And this brings us to a fascinating historical reality. The big ancient empires, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, they were fundamentally built upon the control and distribution of grain. Honestly, you simply wouldn't have the Egyptian pyramids without massive, state-run grain supplies feeding a labor force that built them. And you definitely wouldn't have the vast Roman legions conquering the known world without the logistical masterpiece of Rome's public grain distribution. Rulers understood this perfectly. They realized that controlling the bread meant controlling the people. They didn't just collect taxes in gold, they collected them in grain. They built massive public bakeries. And get this, bread was distributed as actual wages. Ancient rulers literally paid their workers and soldiers in rations of bread and grain. It was the absolute foundation of the state economy. Section 3, The Science and Symbolism. The Magic of Baking. To truly understand bread, we need to zoom all the way into the microscopic level. Let's talk fermentation. It's a metabolic process where microorganisms, like wild yeast, consume sugars and release carbon dioxide and alcohol as byproducts. It's kind of hilarious when you think about it. Humanity's greatest culinary invention is essentially just controlled rotting. Early bakers discovered that if they left dense grain mush out in the open, it would capture wild yeast from the air, bubble up, and transform into a light, airy dough. The sheer chemical brilliance of what happens next is just so cool. Step 1, the yeast consumes the sugars. Step 2, it produces carbon dioxide gas. But step 3 is where the real magic happens. Wheat contains gluten, and when you mix it with water, it forms the sticky network. That gluten network acts exactly like a microscopic balloon, trapping the CO2 gas inside. And that is the exact science of why dough rises and gets that incredibly fluffy texture we all love. Now imagine witnessing that rising dough thousands of years ago. To ancient peoples, this invisible, mysterious process felt completely miraculous. A dead paste of crushed seeds was suddenly alive and growing. Because of this, bread seamlessly evolved from just a food source into a deeply sacred symbol of life, sharing, and divine provision.
You see this rich symbolism everywhere across major world religions, from the traditions of hospitality in Islam to the sacred rituals in Judaism and Christianity.
All right, Section 4, Fuel for Revolutions, Power and Chaos. Anything that holds that much power over human life definitely has a dark side. There's a really stark contrast between a government that manages its bread and one that doesn't. With a stable government, you have a steady grain supply to public bakeries. The people are fed and the state thrives. But if a government mismanages those grain supplies, total collapse. We see this neutrally recorded across history, no matter the political era. From the severe grain crises that crippled the Roman Empire, right up to the bread shortages and rationing that sparked the French Revolution. Literally, when the bread stops, society stops. Which brings us to Section 5, Industrialization and the Future. Modernizing bread. Leaving the chaos of the past behind, the industrial age completely revolutionized the whole shebang. For centuries, baking was done by hand in medieval guilds. But in the late 1800s, roller mills were invented, which gave us mass-produced white flour. By the early 1900s, commercial yeast replaced those slow sourdough starters. And then, the absolute legend. 1928, the introduction of pre-sliced bread. By the mid-1900s, massive factory processing had almost completely taken over the market. Yet, even with industrialization taking over, local traditions totally survived. This brilliantly illustrates how geography and local culture uniquely shaped recipes. The core ingredients are basically the same, but the outcome is beautifully diverse. You got the long, crusty baguette in France, the tandoor-baked naan in India, the pocketed pita in the Middle East, and that fermented, spongy injera in Ethiopia. It's just an incredible diversity of breads all around the globe. And feeding this global appetite takes a staggering amount of farming. Today, global wheat production is a massive economic driver. It's heavily dominated by a few key nations, primarily China, India, and Russia, who lead the world in pumping out the sheer volume of grain required to keep humanity fed. But, the market itself is actually shifting right now. While commercial, factory-made bread still holds the dominant share, modern health and culinary trends are rapidly changing the landscape. We are seeing massive new economic sectors carved out for an artisan baking revival. People really wanting traditional sourdoughs, as well as a booming market for gluten-free products and alternatives. So where does that leave us? Looking forward, our oldest food is colliding with cutting-edge technology. The next era of baking is being shaped by AI-driven precision in factories to cut down on waste. We're also seeing a huge resurgence of ancient, more nutritious grains. And most importantly, scientists are developing sustainable, climate-resistant farming techniques and alternative flours to make sure we can keep baking as the planet's environment changes. Which brings us to a final thought to wrap up this explainer. I want to leave you with this question. Will bread remain humanity's staple food? As we face a changing climate, shifting global diets, and rapid technological advancements, will this ancient technology of just grain and water survive the centuries to come? Honestly, considering it literally brought us from nomadic wanderers to a modern global civilization, my bet is firmly on the bread. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the food that built our world. Stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next